All right, folks, it's a Wednesday, January the 17th. And of course, as always, a lot is going on in the world. We'll be telling you about it as well as seeing what our analysts have to say about things that are going on in the world and in their lives. But Supreme Court is preparing to decide major cases over the power of the federal government and all along those lines. So some people are wondering where Neil Gorsuch will fall in some of these decisions, and that it will be very interesting. So apparently, the Supreme Court will be hearing arguments in cases that some people are saying threaten federal power. So that is something that a lot of folks will be paying attention to, and of course, we're still having people that are paying attention to events going on in the world, as well as what's happening with Israel and the Gaza Strip, as well as what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Pakistan has summoned Tehran's top diplomat in Islamabad, accusing Iran of a territorial attack. So, definitely that's something that is going on as some of these conflicts are widening. So, Iran strikes a militant bases in Pakistan, and Pakistan is warning of consequences. Um, it looks like there are some people that are supporters of Trump that are trying to, I guess, get Vivek Ramaswamy to be the VP, because apparently there were supporters that were chanting that and all along those lines. Even though I think that I've heard that he is looking at a woman to be his vice presidential candidate. Of course, he's still got to win some of the other states like Iowa and well, he just won Iowa, but New Hampshire and South Carolina, which is Nikki Haley's home, as well as some of the other ones, in order to get what many people are feeling is a inevitable consequence or an inevitable result, which will be Biden against Trump. And we do know that somebody here on the network has already said that if that's the case, that Trump will be the victor. So we'll see if that is the case and what goes on in there. I've also heard a lot of people that are wondering about some of the key parts of the Democratic coalition and whether they will even show out, because some of them are saying that they are dis kind of like disillusioned by politics in general, so they may not decide to show up. In which case, it might be a Trump re-election one term after he was elected. So he would be like Grover Cleveland, as we said several times over here, the first person to win, lose, and then win again. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen, because a lot can happen between now and November, but we'll see if that's the case or not the case. And China's population drops for the second year with a record low birth rate. So that will be very interesting. And it's a very populist area of the world, a populous country. And apparently their population shrunk again in 2023 as births continue to fall. So that's for the second year that that took place. And in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Sunak is facing a major test in a showdown over his Rwanda asylum plan. So that's definitely something that's going on. As a matter of fact, when they were in the Commons, several of the MPs apparently repeatedly warned that the plans will not work. So that's something that is going on in that part of the world. So we'll see if things happen in a favorable way for Mr. Sunak. And the U.S. has launched new airstrikes against Houthis in Yemen, targeting anti ship missiles. So that's something else that we're seeing as the conflicts widen in the Middle East. As a matter of fact, the U.S. is set to redesignate Houthis as a terror group. So Houthis to be relisted as a terrorist group after the Red Sea attacks. And that's something that the Biden administration is doing. And world leaders are concerned about the Mideast war escalating after attacks in Lebanon and Iraq. So definitely looks like Israel and Hamas have agreed on a deal on medicine for hostages and aid to Gaza, according to Qatar. So we are seeing that there might be some brokered deals that are going on, and apparently Qatar was playing a role in that. So definitely that's something that we're going to see in the news. And apparently, a lot of the chat at Davos, which is the economic forum, is a lot of chatter about the Trump's potential return to the White House. So apparently, that might be raising some alarms in Berlin and other parts of the country. As a matter of fact, some of those folks are saying that it is high time to prepare. So Trump's return could see U.S. allies pursuing more independent policies. So it'll be interesting to see what's going on in that part of the world as well. So definitely, it looks like if you're wondering about that population growth, it's not just or in China, not just a population decrease, but apparently some of their affluent people are moving. So after the apparently affluent Chinese have been moving to Japan since the COVID lockdown. So that's something else that we're seeing is in the world as well. So that's something that a lot of folks may be paying attention to. And the German protests nationwide after a far right meeting on their deportation plan. So Germans took to the street after the AFD meeting on mass deportation plans. So it's not just here in the United States that we're dealing with migrants and folks that are coming in from other parts of the world. It looks like it's happening in Europe as well. So that is definitely something that is going on. And apparently, thousands rallied to support Russian activists charged with inciting ethnic hatred. So that is something else that was going on even in Russia. So the protests turned violent as activists jailed in Russia's Bashkortostan. So protesters clashed with police as a Russian court jailed that Bashkir activist. And Zelensky calls for peace and not more weapons in Davos. And Putin's war must not become frozen. Zelensky warns as Ukraine troops face some very frigid weather over in that area as well. And President Zelensky told the world leaders the Ukraine war is not just about us. So definitely will be interesting to see what happens with those plans as well. And Fujitsu shares dropped nearly 4%. Got to bring on Jim Eade as he is very much into the investment world and see whether that's going to impact his trading, as its Europe chief says that there were some issues around compensations. And I think some of that had to do with the postal workers. So Fujitsu says it will compensate UK postal workers who were ruined by its software. So he said that they were truly sorry. And the Fujitsu employee says she wasn't aware of data integrity issues with Horizon IT system. So that's something else going on where the computer technology isn't going as well as some people were expecting. And I know that Jim and others talk about things going around the world, and definitely even Chris Greco had a show called Worldview, and he should be giving me some more episodes about that sometime this year. But we learn about different countries, and right now we're learning about Somalia. The search continues for Navy SEALs who went missing near Somalia. So that's something else that we're seeing as well. So it'll be interesting to see if they find those folks or not. And if you're wondering about France, where it looks like France, Macron is shifting to the right on schools and birth rate. So he is seeking to revitalize his presidency with a vow for a stronger France. So Macron vows to break France's taboos and fight the far right. And his economic plan apparently is avoiding tough budget questions. And North Korea says it will no longer pursue reconciliation with the South, according to Kim Jong un. So Kim Jong un has a new enemy, number one, and apparently that's South Korea. And Kim Jong un says Korean reunification is no longer possible, and North Korea's rejection of the South, according to some, is both a shock and inevitable. So Netanyahu says the war against Hamas is set to continue into 2025. So some people were thinking that was going to be a quick war as well, but it looks like they are ready to dig in and that it could be another war that lasts multiple years and all in that space, because even their leader is saying that he is set to have the war continue not just through the rest of this year, but well into 2025. So that could be a war that lasts 2 years. I think the Ukraine-Russia war is in its third year. So these wars may be going longer than we thought that they were going to go in that space. And at least 17 people were killed in an explosion at a Thai fireworks factory. So, safety issues around the country are something that is going on as well. And NATO needs a war-fighting transformation, as anything can happen at any time, according to a top NATO military officer. And that officer also is urging allies and leaders to plan for the unexpected in Ukraine. So it looks like there's some people that are saying that we need to even upgrade our system as well. So that's just some of the world things that are going on. I might get to some U.S. things in a minute and everything. And of course, we'll bring in our panelists and all along those lines. By the way, if you're wondering about science and how it can impact things in the world, there was a story in NPR about how lab-grown rhino horns could stop poaching. So that's something that's going on, and some people are wondering why. We may never know, because sometimes these science things are done in secret and we don't find out till later and everything. And I hate to tell you this, but if you were thinking that Bobby was the oldest dog according to the Guinness Book of World Records, well, we might have to stick around and figure out whether the dog is old as they say the dog is, and all along those lines, because the world record title for that particular dog was suspended. That's right, they suspended the record while they are investigating. That's right, even the Guinness Book of World Records will investigate titles and all along those lines. So they will investigate and see if it's true or not in that case. I'm gonna bring in Jim Eade. I don't see many other folks with us, but we'll bring in Jim Eade and see what he's got to say. But it was quite interesting to read that story, that even the dogs get investigated if they think that there's something fishy going on with their being selected and all along those lines. So definitely it looks like they're going to investigate Bobby, B-O-B-I, as his title as the oldest dog may be in question. So maybe they think the dog was born later in the year or at a later time and everything. And I also saw some good news, and I don't think she's been investigated, but I don't know, Jim, I can't remember if you got military background or friends with military background, but the first active service woman won, I believe it was Miss America, but it was one of those pageants and everything. So she won over the weekend, and the Air Force was taking pride on that, since it was the first active service woman or service person, because she was definitely taking pride, and even the Air Force was taking pride because they put out a tweet about that in the last couple of days, where they were very proud of the fact that they had the first active person in the military there in that title, as many years as they've been doing pageants. And apparently she's like a little a Top Gun type, because I think that she had gone
Ooh.
to Harvard, but she is trained as a pilot and actually is an actual active military pilot and all along those lines. So she apparently has beauty and brains as well. So, but she did win the title, and the first one of the military to win said title.
Wow. What a great wrap up, Mark. I
Yeah.
don't know where to begin. Um, I think that, I thought pageants were on their way out a long time ago, but maybe they're still popular. But I don't think Trump should mess with her. She seems like she could take care of herself.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
she could take care of herself. Trump would definitely have a problem with a debate with her and everything.
and he used to crash the dressing rooms and the pageants that he ran. So, like I think she'd toss him out.
Probably toss about on his ears, as the expression goes, and everything.
Yeah,
So yeah, he probably might even get kicked out in the hard way and all in
yeah.
that space. And
Well, a couple of the things that you mentioned. There's so much to be concerned about
yeah,
in the world, but the most recent development, North Korea is starting to launch missiles,
yeah,
and launch missiles that might be tipped with nuclear materials or some weapons of mass destruction, and they're flying them over and around Japan and South Korea, and the reports are that Kim is ready for war, and that's really disturbing, because as much as Trump wrote love letters to Kim, um, that guy's very dangerous. And of course, we don't expect South Korea and North Korea to unite, but they should be able to live in peace. And the saber rattling is very disturbing to me. Who knows what a dictator will do in any given moment? It's not like the military in North Korea is going to talk him out of it. So if he decides to do something just because he's nuts, um, or having a bad day, this could result in massive destruction. And I know that Japan is arming, South Korea is arming. It's very disturbing. But that's only one of the things that's going on in the world that's deeply unsettling. And I think the Israel-Gaza conflict, as you say, is extended into the Middle East, and Iran has been behind a lot of these terrorist activities. And how belligerent are they going to be? It's an open question in my mind. And it's good that Qatar is offering its assistance in trying to broker some peace. I know that Saudi Arabia has done some outreach too. So not all Arab world, the whole world is not the same. And there are people that are working towards peace, towards a two-state solution. And Israel offering to do a ceasefire and provide aid might be a step in the direction, because, whatever the military resources of Israel, their economy has taken a hit now. People have been taken from jobs and conscripted into the army. National reserves kind of like called up to be supportive. And a lot of their economy depended on technical innovations. And this is all, being disrupted by the military activities. So I don't think it's in Israel's best interest to extend the war very long. And Netanyahu, I can't wait for Israel to elect someone else. I think he was insensitive with the settlement expansions on the West Bank and provocative in some of his actions. And I think they need a new leader in Israel. And but I'm hopeful in that scenario, because it seems like some of the Arab world is reaching out for peace, and it's in Israel's best interest to have peace. And then the Russian and Ukraine matter, well, how is Congress going to react? Obviously the Patriot missile defense system that they provided was instrumental in repelling Russian missile attacks. And how could we stop supporting them? I have no idea, but the Congress is so inept right now. I have no idea whether they're going to come through for Ukraine. I don't have any confidence in them. But I hope they surprise me and do something for Ukraine in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I see we've got Sasha and Toby with us now as well. But one of the things that I know was being discussed was this notion of the widening conflict. I think we talked about it a little bit on yesterday, with possibly more of the NATO countries getting involved in Ukraine and Russia. And it does sound like the Middle East could be widening as well. So I know a lot of people are having fears that this could be the beginning of a World War III and all along those lines. And like I said, even in that news report, there are a lot of folks that were thinking that this would be a quick war with the Israel and Hamas. But as it has been expanding, even Netanyahu and some of the other government officials are now saying that it could go well into 2025, which would be the rest of this year and even some of next year. So that actually somewhat surprising me, because I do know a lot of people were expecting this war to be a very quick war because of the type of military might that Israel has, and particularly compared to the terrorist groups and their neighbors and everything. So I was just wondering your thoughts around that, Sasha, because like I said, I've even heard you say talk about how this war would be much quicker and everything. But even a recent announcement came from Israel, and it was from their leader to expect the war to go into 2025. So he's looking like Zelensky, he's digging in for a longer conflict and everything. But I was just wondering your take on that, because that, based on our conversations on this show and other shows, and even the way that both you and Nick talked about, that it would be, payback time, and that a lot of people would be a quicker war and everything. But it looks like they're digging in for a longer war. But I was wondering your take on that.
It all depends from what horizon you're looking at all these wars, and to understand it better, you have to figure out that all these wars which are ongoing and many other wars that are about to start anytime, it's all a creation of Russia. Russia feels that it wants to take revenge for losing the Cold War. The whole world operated under Yalta-Potsdam agreements after Second World War.
Mhm.
And once Soviet Union actually ceased to exist in 1991, so therefore all those agreements automatically becoming null and void, and Russia strongly disagreed with that, except that in the 90s they just don't had anything going for them. They had no economy, no money. They were in complete mess. However, in 2000, once Putin came to power and their position stabilized, the oil went up to $140 a barrel, and so on. The situation started to change rather quickly, and Putin seized on this opportunity. And now, if you analyze both Ukrainian and Israeli war, both countries are, and countries which are supporting them, they're fighting the same enemy, and that enemy is Russia, who sponsored all these terrorist groups, and Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah, and just name it, they're all Russian. Even look, if you look at these tunnels that Hamas built in Gaza, now it's being, because a lot of tunnels are already being taken by Israelis, and they've analyzed all the technical knowledge to build these tunnels. Never mind the money required. We are talking about billions of dollars. We're talking about expertise of Moscow subway system builders. They were planning, they were constructing, they were advising. Even if you wanna, you see, it's not like a hole. Like you remember in Afghanistan, there were some kind of holes in the grounds where people would go down to this tunnels. I don't know how you want to call it, and then would came out several kilometers away from that, and until Americans get used to it and started to deal with that accordingly. So these tunnels in Gaza, this is definitely built with a great involvement, and they found some documents relating to Moscow. It's a company, Moscow Metrostroy. It's a Moscow company that is in the business of constructing the subway systems in Moscow. So the same expertise, same people participated in this building of the Gaza tunnels. And these tunnels, they have no other use. It's not, some people suggested that, well, maybe it's irrigation system that they wanted to get water somewhere or what. No, their aim was only one, the military. There is no other purpose of using these tunnels. But anyway, what I'd like to say is that speaking about the United States, it's for practical reasons, it stopped all its help to Ukraine, financial, the military help, any other. But guess what? The Europe increased its help tremendously, especially England. They got all these bilateral agreements, and interestingly enough, it's not only that England will help to defend Ukraine, it's vice versa as well. If England will need Ukrainian help, it's there. Ukrainian, by the way, Ukrainians are very interesting people. Back in when it's happened 9/11, Ukrainians were helping U.S. in Iraq, and then later on in Afghanistan. They had their troops available, so Americans used them. And they were, even at that time, they showed themselves as excellent fighters and excellent military personnel. So I think Russia will learn its lesson in Ukraine full. And if U.S. see, don't forget with the U.S. there is still unclear situation whether Trump could become a president. If that's the case, then of course there will be no help to Ukraine. Furthermore, there will be dismantling of NATO. U.S. will be taken out of NATO. He will have probably some possible alliances with countries like Russia. And so America will take Russia's role as supreme terrorist organization. God forbid.
Well, it feels like it and everything. But speaking of which and everything along those lines, and speaking of America and Trump and all along those lines, we know that he's facing several charges of different types, everything from things dealing with the election to sex abuse to a number of other things. And one of those cases is actually going to be taking place it's actually going on now, and that is the damage trials with Donald Trump that is featuring E. Jean Carroll. And apparently Trump must pay dearly for what he's done, according to his lawyers, what they told the jury on yesterday. So this is one of those defamation cases and cases around sex abuse and all in that space. So will this case hurt his chances of being elected and everything? Because that was something that I saw on the United States side, and I also saw something that I'm going to ask Toby about that Nikki Haley said as well. But anybody want to jump in as to E. Jean Carroll and the impact of these various trials? But this is one that is at the center stage right now.
Well, it's interesting to me that it's such an obvious pattern for Trump to keep shooting his mouth off when he should shut up. And this trial, it was an accusation of rape, and it got lowered down to sexual assault. But he had to pay damages. He was ordered to pay damages. And of course, Trump's main defense is delay. And so he appeals, and so it goes on and on. But when the defamation suit was settled, when he had to pay, he kept bad mouthing the woman and insulting her, and so she filed another suit to make him stop. And will he stop? No. He never seems to suffer consequences, and he keeps doing the same rotten things over and over again. But at some point, the country is going to realize that this is not someone who should be leading anything, and let alone the country. And I think that what we saw in Iowa is that there is an evangelical base that's going to vote for him no matter what. About 60% of the people polled in Iowa said that even if he was convicted of a felony, they would still vote for him. Now, this is the hard right Republican base in Iowa that's saying that. But that meant that over 30% of them said that they wouldn't. Okay. So, and if you extend that to independents, I think it goes, it flips. And I think you're getting like the vast majority of independents wouldn't vote for him if he was convicted of a felony. And I think any rational thinking human being wouldn't vote for someone convicted of a felony of this kind of nature. And he's already been found guilty by a judge of fraud. And it's just a question of how much damages he's going to pay. So, this guy's got so many charges pending, and he keeps delaying the result. So, he wants to get it past the election, but, he's already been convicted. He's already having to pay damages, and all of these other things. When there's smoke, there's got to be some fire. And, but there's a portion of the country that doesn't care about any of that, and they're going to vote for him. Now, how many of them are there? Are there a majority? Well, he got 51% in Iowa, and for somebody like Trump to only get 51%, the only comparable thing that I can remember in history is Lyndon Johnson only got a small majority, something like 51%. And he abandoned his campaign, and we ended up with Hubert Humphrey running against Nixon. Yeah. So it was not exactly the shot in the arm that people are portraying it as. And New Hampshire is going to be very interesting to see as well.
Jim, but think about something, that if he's got 51%, it means 49% were against Trump. And this is very troublesome, simply because it's, as you said, it's a very conservative, hardcore conservative state. And people in that hardcore conservative state, which is basically his base, and supposedly I thought he would get 80+%. But 51 It's rather weak. Now, another thing, what can help him though, if it's Supreme Court will agree that the president is above the law and he is allowed to do anything, regardless of what it is, and he cannot be charged and prosecuted. Now, if that ruling will happen, then Trump is essentially immune from all these prosecutions and all the charges and everything.
Yeah, just really quickly along those same lines, I know we got Nick because I do have a legal question for him. But Jacoby, one of the quotes that I saw yesterday as I was scouring some of the news sources and everything is that there is no doubt that slavery was part of the United States history and everything. But apparently, Nikki Haley, who's from the great state of South Carolina, said that racism has never been a factor in the United States and that the U.S. has never been a racist country. And I'm going like, wait a minute, the Indians were pretty much destroyed and pretty much you brought in an entire, not just Africans, but also Asians into the population unwillingly and all along those lines to work various businesses. And the reason I mentioned the Asians is because they were very active in the railroad part of where Jim Ead is in California, as my understanding of history and all along those lines. But definitely it seems to me that that whole remark is a almost ludicrous remark to make. But I was just wondering your take on that, because when I heard that, I was going like, Nikki, what are you thinking?
That's Nikki Haley's problem. Nikki Haley that whole, and honestly, that's bigger than Nikki Haley. That's the whole premise that the GOP is running on. That's the whole battle against woke, because they're trying to say that we're a racist. It's part of our history, and we just have to come to terms with that. Until we come to terms with the fact that we have a very, very, very atrocious past that has so many, from, you know, what happened with the Native Americans and how they are still one of the groups that still is oppressed in our nation, and the things that go on that they have to deal with laws and regulations around their land. I mean, heck, the whole Keystone Pipeline extension was an example of that. I mean, our history is riddled with it, and we're never gonna, until we come to terms and, you know, admit, yes, slavery was a main point of the Civil War. It was written in the it was in the secession papers that Mississippi wrote. It was listed as the main reason why they are seceding the nation. It was also the reason why the others wrote their letters of secession. It was in the, if I remember, it's in the second or third sentence. So you cannot ignore those facts. And that was literally not that long ago. Matter of fact, the civil rights movement happened in the 50s. Oh yeah, we want to keep talking about, hey, you know, the Democrat Party created the Klan. Well, hey, you know, in the 50s and the 60s, that's when the civil rights movement happened. And we're still in a time where people are alive during those marches. I mean, Ruby Bridges, when she's still alive, and she was the one who actually helped integrate schools. So we cannot ignore these facts. Interracial marriage just happened in the 2000s. In the 2010s is when John McCain recognized the MLK holiday. So the idea that racism it was never a part of our nation, or that's ludicrous. It was just it's a throwaway line to talk to a base that wants to ignore the facts because they feel that it insults them and that's calling them racist. It's not. It's just pointing out the history of the nation. And it blows my mind that we celebrate that those same individuals that want to ban history around this are the same individuals that run to the MLK holiday and say, hey, let's celebrate MLK. This is the same guy that you would call woke today. The same guy, the same guy that was protesting, that had to march peacefully down the streets against, I mean,
Speaking,
unimaginable.
yeah, speaking of his woke ideas, or some what people would consider woke ideas, one of the things is I was studying and looking up King recently, and actually we played on this network one of his speeches from Chaos to Community. Where do we go from that? Go from here? And I probably did the book backwards in terms of the title and everything. But that being said, and everything along those lines, one of the things that he talked about, and Nick, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, as well as Sasha, who is in the investment space, and even Jim, who's in the investment space. But surprisingly, in 1968 or 69, when he made that particular speech and everything, so we're talking many years ago, he talked about the amount of money that we spent on wars, and in that time he was talking about Vietnam and the amount of money that we spent on space travel, and he actually called for universal wages. And I know that that's something that we talked about on Economic Mondays and everything. So is that something that will ever come around? Because, to some degree we had it with the stimulus money, but is it something, because it was something that Dr. King literally said he felt we should be able to have in that particular speech and all along those lines. But what is your thoughts? Will we ever get to a point where people have a designated universal wage?
I'm going to defer to Sasha because his hand was up, but then I'll go ahead. Sasha.
I had a question to Jetovi. U.S. is not a unique country in the world that had a slavery. There were many, many other countries. I'm not talking about Greece 2,500 years ago. I'm talking about even the same time when the U.S. had this war of caused by slavery. I'll come back to that in a sec. There was slavery in Russia, but unlike the U.S. slavery, they enslaved their own people. They didn't have the Portuguese slave traders coming to Russia and say, "Okay, we have slaves for you. Take them." No, nobody came to Russia with slaves. They got enslaved their own people, and that slavery was going for centuries until Alexander II. He abolished in 1861. He abolished this slavery. They called it a different name, but it was nothing but slavery. The only problem is that they were free, but they didn't have a land. So they couldn't exist. So they were better off as slaves than the free people, but with no land, no money, nothing. Now, what's happened in U.S.? Look, I of course, I don't know history of U.S. as well as you do, but something just doesn't add up. So you're saying that slavery was a cause of war. Okay, let's look at it. So here's U.S., here's the South when there is a slavery, and the economics of slavery in the South was justified because of the agricultural nature of the land in the South, and there was a North industrial, North building up a new society where there was no need for slavery. Slavery wouldn't work in North. They needed free people to work in the factories and the different enterprises and so on. So then what happened is, let me understand. So here is the South with the slavery. Everything is okay, and here is the North where there is no slavery, and it is okay. So at what point either North said to the South, "We hate whatever slavery you have, and we want you to stop it," and they refuse, and so North started the war against South, or it was vice versa. South said that, okay, we don't like what you're doing, so you don't have slavery, that's your own business. If you want to get out of this and keep our customs and our way of life and so on. And that escalated to such an atrocious war. With, okay, they could say, okay, you don't want slavery. Okay, you don't have slavery. We do have slavery. That's okay. Let's live in peace or so on. So what escalated this situation, which was known for years? It didn't happen somewhere that all of a sudden there's no slavery in the North, there is slavery in the South. They are living like that for tens of dozens of years, centuries perhaps. And all of a sudden, one side says, we are going to fight with you and others? I said, yes. Okay, we are going to fight you as well. And all this war started. Stoic, how you see it really? What's happened?
I'm kind of missing the question. Is
Yeah, but-
it what was the impetus for the war, or what is the?
Well, if it's a war for slavery, slavery existed a year before the war started, 5 years before the war started,
Well, slavery.
15 years and 25
Yeah.
years. So what's really happened that there was a war if the fact of slavery has been there like for years, if not centuries? So what's happened all of a sudden that
A moral shift. A moral shift began to happen, and then when the separation of when the South, when Lincoln wanted to make sure the states stayed united, the South decided, hey, we're leaving because you're taking away our rights to slaves and property and all, and our economics, because everything that the South was fighting for, again, listed in their whole secession papers, was about keeping slavery, because how important slavery was, or the slaves were, to our economic success, as you actually pointed out. But again, there was a moral shift.
And not only the moral shift, but there was, just to add to what you're saying, Jacoby, there was literally, just like there have been in other parts of the world, including those that have gone against colonialism and other things, there were people that were fighting against slavery even during the times that slavery was not having the Civil War. So there were a number of attacks that were going on within the slavery system. I mean, there is John Brown and the Harper Valley. I'm thinking Harper is, you know what I'm saying about, yeah. Attack, and there was a number of other attacks. Harriet Tubman was literally taking people, some of them up to your neck of the woods, up to Canada and everything. So there was a very much of an abolitionist movement as well. So there was definitely a number of things where people were fighting against slavery even during the time of slavery, because not everybody was just coming into slavery thinking that this was the Shangri-La attitude and all in that space. So there were people even within it that were fighting against it, and they did have support from some in the North and some in other parts of the not just country but the world as well. So there was definitely some pushes that were going on in that space.
I hope you're aware that in Canada, slavery was only in Indian tribes. There was no slavery of white people against others, whether it's black.
That's what I just said. Harriet Tubman took a lot of people up to the northeast, up to the north, and to Canada. I mean, that was part of
Indian tribes. Of course, they were enslaving their own people, same like in Russia.
I think James has a comment.
Yeah, the traditional start of the Civil War was Fort Sumter, when the Confederacy fired upon the U.S. garrison there. But you know, I remember in high school reading Charles Beard and his feeling about economic determinism causing the Civil War. You know, it can, because you know there was an agrarian South and a factory-based North, but you know there can be arguments for multiple reasons for why the Civil War. But if you study the history of it, you know, the Abraham Lincoln was initially a Whig. We don't talk about the Whigs anymore, but they were the main party against the Democrats. And what caused the Republican Party was because they were against slavery. And the big thing that was going on there was we were adding new territories as states. And would they be slave states or free states? And that was the big fight that was going on, and why the Republicans split off from the Whigs and ended up becoming a successor to the Whigs. So Abraham Lincoln started as a Whig, became a Republican, and his history was of negotiating alongside all these people. But even he could not negotiate with the South. There was a determination to continue their way of life. And, you know, I wasn't alive in the 50s, but I was in the 60s, and I was heartbroken by the assassinations of Bob Kennedy and Martin Luther King. But at that time, the Mississippi was saying they wanted to preserve the Mississippi way of life, which included sharecropping and lynching.
Right.
This was in the 60s. So to say that slavery is dead, or there's no racism or whatever, no, that's nuts. But what happened there is because the Republicans were the abolitionist party, and Democrats were the formed the KKK and all of that kind of stuff. That all changed because of the civil rights. The Democratic South became a Republican South. And Nixon played on that with the Southern strategy because they were so outraged by the civil rights movement that they switched parties. And Nixon exploited it. And Ronald Reagan would use in his campaign speech appeals to states' rights. This was a dog whistle. And this was to ferment this hatred of others, in this case, blacks. But I will say, I've read the KKK literature, and blacks are not the most hated people in KKK literature. What they called the Romans were, and they were the Roman Catholics.
Right.
Because Roman Catholics, you couldn't see you were a Roman Catholic. You could see when you were black, but the Roman Catholics could infiltrate, and they were dangerous, and the KKK hated the Romans.
Are you talking about yourself?
Yes.
Happens is what they are.
No, but along those
You know,
same
the
lines,
other
I like
problem-
that. I like that and everything. But along
The way
those
I
same lines and
understand it, Mark,
everything,
is that the wealthiest people in the United States at that time were Natchez Trace, Mississippi. In other words, if you go along the place, they were making money hand over fist in the cotton trades, and they built these big mansions in Mississippi. And frankly, the Yankees didn't like that whole idea that they were the wealthiest place in the United States. Can you imagine northern Mississippi? Throughout Mississippi, they had the wealthiest people.
well, but Nick, they weren't exactly the biggest fans of a group of people that were definitely tied to the Methodist Church, and all along those lines, because the Dukes would be hanging out with some of the robin barons of that time, as would the Rothschilds and a number of other big families. So there was a lot of that kind of industrial conversation going on with some very much robber baron types that were going on. But as I've said on this show and other shows before, there were some interesting relationships even among the African American and some of the rich elite and everything, because literally the Black Wall Street here in Durham was literally formed while Mr. Merrick, and I think it was Mr. Merrick who was the barber, was cutting the hair of some of these folks as they were doing big business deals, and he was learning some of that trade. So it's like going to school without going to school.
Yeah,
and
what Nick said is a factor. It's like less than 1% of a factor. What was really going on was which states are going to come in as free states or
Right. There
slave
was
states.
that.
And that was power over Congress. And that was really the issue that they were fighting about.
Also, the reason it's being discussed today, here's an interesting factoid. The day Joe Biden was born, he is closer time-wise to the Civil War than he is to the present. And see, that's the problem. In other words, we're
Is that
not.
true of Trump too?
Yeah, but Trump was around
yeah.
that same time because it's about a 3-year
So the
difference
real
between
problem
them.
is We're not. We are not that far generationally away from the Civil War, and the United Kingdom eliminated slavery before
Well,
that.
before,
They
yeah.
don't have
Well,
that long-term history. But I agree with Jatovi. If you look at the United States, we're not only currently a racist country, but our whole history is a racist country. In other words, it's not like, oh, this is new. This has been going on for 200 or 300 years, and I can't.
But
believe
along
it.
but Nick, along those same lines, and that's one of the other. Hold on a
I'd
second,
like
but
to see
Nick,
that, Mark, where she said, "Oh no, there's no racism in the United
yeah, I
States."
can't believe that she said that. But Nick, along those same lines, another part of what goes on in the discussion around race, and I've got 2 incidences that I want to bring into this conversation. Everything is the way that we use. The police force in a lot of ways was a continuation of the overseer system in slavery and everything. And now we've got folks like the Ohio police that are using military grade weapons. So they just had a raid of a home where they were using flashbangs and there was a toddler inside. So there's a lot of people, and of course they had body cams on, so people got to see what they were doing and everything. So there was that going on. And then in the state of Washington, there were several officers that were cleared in a African-American man's death, but they're going to get $500,000 each to resign. So they were found not guilty in the death of Manny Ellis in 2020, and they have resigned from the department. So they've been acquitted, and then they're also going to get some money in order to resign because they don't want to have that stain on their reputation. So they're going to actually give them almost $500,000.
My feeling is Nikki Haley is, the most classical Republican candidate that I can see. And, she's not flawless by any stretch of the imagination. But, when you're speaking a lot, you're going to make what Johnny Miller used to call a double bogey, because you're on the air a lot and you're talking and you're going to say something stupid. It's just always happens to some people. This was incredibly stupid. If the reporting that I'm hearing is accurate, but she also made another similar type of mistake. So there may be something about her trying to appeal to a base that
She might be trying to appeal to that Christian evangelistic base that y'all were talking about earlier and everything. I said I had one question for Nick, and I got a slightly humorous story that is this international that we can talk about as well. But the Supreme Court is actually going to be talking, and I think Jim might have alluded to it earlier, or Sasha, about some things that could weaken federal rulemaking. So you are the person that is in the legal space and everything. So what is your thoughts around that as a lawyer? Because apparently that's one of those Supreme Court cases, and I hope that we're going to have that show with Carla Pratt sometime in the next month or two to talk about some of these cases and everything. But it looks like they're going to be major cases over the power of the federal administrative state. So as a lawyer, what is your take on this, and where are we going with this attempt to weaken federal rulemaking?
Yeah, see, my wife asked me some questions like that, and I said, you know what the answer is? It's complicated, and that's the reason it's before the Supreme Court. Okay, so if I knew the answer and they knew the answer, we wouldn't have to have a Supreme Court. So obviously it's a complex issue. The Supreme Court, when it comes to taking jurisdiction over a case, first of all, they only take 1 out of 1,000 cases, seriously, and only 1 out of 100 attorneys are licensed before the United States Supreme Court. I got licensed because I had a case before the United States Supreme Court. I filed a motion for certiorari. It was granted. Boing. So all of a sudden we're in front of the Supreme Court. So I had to get admitted before the bar of the Supreme Court. But they only handle certain cases that are of high public interest, or in our case, it was what they call a conflict in the laws. For example, like where and I've been to your court, Jim. I'm licensed before the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is the western part of the United States. It is huge. And then there's the 11th Circuit, which is the southern United States. It is very small. These conflicts take place where the judges in San Francisco will be against the judges in New Orleans, who are in the Fifth Circuit, and the United States Supreme Court has to resolve the conflict. They call it conflict jurisdiction. So not all judges agree, which people are finding out, and that's one reason the political appointees are so important. Because if you look through the Constitution of the United States, it's fluff and stuff language. It's not definitive. Your right to due process. Well, what does it mean? It means whatever the judge says it means. Nothing more, nothing less, said Lewis Carroll.
Hey, Nick, along those same lines, because Kelly asked me a question. Hey, Nick, hold on a second. Along those same lines, because Kelly asked me a question that I was not 100% sure about, that being Kelly Jones that pops on our show sometimes and everything. But aren't judges supposed to be neutral? I thought that was the nation of judges, but then even what you just said is that a lot of times the Republicans will appoint Republican-leaning judges, Democrats will appoint Democrat-leaning judges. But I thought ever since the Wild Wild West days and everything else, that the judges were supposed to be neutral. And I do know that some of the more smaller district courts are nonpartisan elections, so they don't run under a party system. But it does seem like the federal ones, and then to some degree the state ones, are mandated by whoever is in control. So doesn't that go against the judicial system?
Yeah, it's kind of a sad state of affairs, but you have a point, Mark. In other words, the best, if they were able to do it, is for the judges to sign on their documents, like their voter registration. They're not affiliated, but they don't do that. They'll sign Democrat, they'll sign Republican, and unfortunately that now creates a lot of politics, which goes back to the case that I'm looking at in New York, where Trump was adjudicated guilty by the judge. Then he has his trial, but his trial is really on damages. Now, this is a trend in courts in general throughout the United States, which I hope Carla Pratt will explain more closely, that judges make decisions of fact based on law. In other words, what they're doing is they're becoming the arbitrator of the fact and the law through a process called summary judgment. So the attorneys, what they do is you file a motion for summary judgment on your behalf. You throw affidavits in, and you kind of hope, it's almost like throwing a Hail Mary touchdown.
Kitchen sink.
You hope that the judge rules in your favor. Did you know today, and I'm talking civil trials, not criminal trials, less than 7% or 5% will ever see a jury? Okay.
Yeah, I knew it was real low and everything. But
good luck. You're not going to see a jury.
Yeah, there won't see a jury. But apparently there's speaking of Mississippi, there's a case where there is a call because they found some bodies near a jail. I'm already suspicious when you find bodies near a jail and everything that there's going to be a call for a federal investigation after some 215 bodies were found in unmarked graves near a Mississippi jail, and the MS coroner that buried the man without telling families is sharing his notification policy. But apparently there are folks that are wanting to investigate this, and I can imagine that if you had an unmarked grave, you would definitely want to be investigating.
200, when did this happen? 215 unmarked graves in Mississippi near a jail?
Near a jail. This was reported this last couple of days and everything. So yeah, there's a lot of people that are.
That could be a very interesting story. I think a lot more interesting than the Secretary of Defense who didn't call in sick, which I think is sick that it's on TV. It shouldn't even be on TV.
That should be on TV, but there's the light story that I was going to get to, and we've only got about 3 or 4 more minutes to go. Is apparently, and it's kind of a serious issue, but there is a red suspect that was accused of faking his death. This was actually in Scotland to avoid justice, and he's denied his identity. So I guess he's going around saying that I can't be the person that you are saying did it because that person, I'm not that person, because the man was extradited from Scotland and continues to dispute his identity. Ironically, in your neck of the woods, or one of your neck of the woods, because this is in a Salt Lake court and everything. So a U.S. fugitive has been accused of faking his death to avoid rape charges, denies he is the suspect at the hearing. So he's actually going there going like, it's not me. I'm not really the person that y'all are after. So y'all think that I'm me, but I'm not really me.
I got to ask Nick a question. Nick, the Colorado Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court ruled 4-3 that Trump would not be on the ballot because of a violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But other states have ruled differently. And it seems to me it has to go to the Supreme Court. But what I'm hearing is that the Supreme Court is going to find some way to not take it up.
Not take it up? Really?
Not take it up. But it seems like, based on what I was thinking and what you were saying, they have to. I mean,
because when it becomes a question of big interest question, they generally take it up. So I would assume both the Maine and the Colorado decisions will be heard before the United States Supreme Court. The only question is, when do they hear them?
Right.
Because the Supreme Court goes, okay, we're going to hear it in October term. Well, that creates a lot of problems because you go off the ballot before then.
That's what I'm hearing exactly, that they're going to punt until it.
Right.
Yeah.
Hold on. But my curiosity, my curiosity is, how will they punt it? Because from what I hear, you have to either define secession itself, insurrection itself. And are they going to do that, or are they going to punt on that piece?
Yeah, right.
Are they going to punt on the states' rights portion, on how they run elections?
There's a lot of punting. Hold on a second, because we only got about another 2 or 3 minutes to go. Speaking of punting and everything, apparently there's a punting going on in the presidential debate, and it's actually involving somebody that we were talking about earlier, because the next Republican presidential debate has been canceled after Nikki Haley said she won't go if Trump won't go. So it would have been a debate, I guess, between Nikki and Ron DeSantis, and now she's saying you won't see me there unless Mr. Trump is there and everything.
Right.
I think she is wise to avoid any debate at all, especially against DeSantis. Is that she has a huge problem with the Boeing affair. And so far, Republicans downplaying that, and they attack her about that, but in a way that she answered something, and that's the end of story. Now, if she will become a nominee or even a vice presidential material, the Democratic Party is not going to be quiet about that. They will make a big noise about that, because there is a reason for a noise. She did absolutely incredible atrocities in all this affair by moving the production facility to South Carolina, which is a very backward place in the United States. And sorry to say, maybe
I think the people in South Carolina would disagree and be.
Yes, they would disagree. I understand that.
That's actually the whole voice
US sources. Maybe it's not such a backward. Maybe it's a brilliant place.
Speaking of South Carolina, there's a whole battle between North and South Carolina, because while we have a professional football team, and even Jacoby knows this because he's got some connections to the sports world. While we have a professional football team in Charlotte, North Carolina, there has been a push and pull between South Carolina and North Carolina because the practice facility is actually in South Carolina, and there has been some talk for years about that football team literally moving to South Carolina, and that could be like one of them midnight run moves where they literally move from one of our major metropolitan areas to another area in South Carolina. And I know that conversation's been going on. Jacoby had for about 5 years.
It's not happening though.
All I can see is Berkeley and Stanford are now part of the ACC, of which Clemson is a member. So is the UNC.
Well,
I'm giving up my season tickets.
I don't think
ask me why Stanford and UCal Berkeley.
UCLA and USC are part of the Big Ten now. Come on,
it's all about money, and Florida State right now is in the middle of moving out of the ACC. That's their big fight that they're trying to pull. All the divisions are going to shift. The Pac-12 is now fully dissolved. I think there are only 2 teams, and it's going to be completely gone.
Yeah.
I don't know where those
season tickets.
It's just where everybody goes. But Mark, no, they're not going to move. It's the same thing that happened with the Bills with Toronto trying to pull the Bills. It's just not going to happen. They're just going to stay where they are. Too much money. And it's going to cost way
Toronto. And Stanford's got a lot of money. I mean, I'd much rather have Stanford than
what we discussed just a couple of minutes ago about this Colorado decision. What I thought about is that look, 7 out of 7 decided that Trump was involved in insurrection. 7 judges of the Supreme Court of Colorado recognized that. So now, what the Supreme Court has to say that all the 7 judges, all of them, were wrong. There was no insurrection, or there was insurrection, but Trump didn't participate, or something like this. It's highly unlikely, in my opinion. The other thing is what they can say, that yes, he was involved in insurrection, but he still should be on a ballot. Only very unlikely. So what the present situation in the United States is that each state is responsible for all related election questions. So the Supreme Court of Colorado didn't overstep its authority to make a final ruling on election issue. So now what's going to happen is that the Supreme Court has to say, well, you know what? It's not so. We overrule the decision.
And Sasha, part of that will be because of what goes on with the other states, because literally there
doesn't matter. So there could be
right here in North Carolina to get him off the ballot. So there's a push
this out.
So there could be states that will remove him from the ballot, and there will be states that will have him on the ballot. What's wrong with that if it's a state issue?
So check this out. And that's one thing that I was talking about punting, Sasha. Now, there's another punt that is going to have to happen because this is crazy. Because, of course, around the political realm, they say that judges that were appointed by blank, blank, blank are all unfair. But they don't think that, okay, well, it's unfair for him to be judged by judges that he picked. So he picked a couple of the judges that are on the actual Supreme Court. So people think that those judges are going to be fair because why?
Yeah, it's about how they got appointed. Clarence Thomas's wife was involved.
That's where I was trying to get to.
And he won't recuse himself. That's crazy.
She was legitimately making calls to overthrow. So it's like,
well, I mean, wasn't Amy Coney Barrett one of the Trump appointments? So wouldn't she have to recuse herself as well?
No. I don't mind who appointed who, but when your wife is involved in what you're going to rule on, come on.
And
you got to recuse yourself. That's common sense.
His excuse, remember, was I don't know what my wife does.
Yeah.
Okay. We're in the same house, but we don't talk and everything. We're getting ready to wrap up because we've actually gone a little bit over and everything. But just 2 quick things. One, like I said, will be lighthearted. The other one is very serious. But Taiwan's new leader says he's going to stick to the status
Yeah.
quo, but his past is making the U.S. nervous because some people are even wondering about the Trump Lai, I believe is his name, LAI combo, and how this could make the situation interesting with the relationship between China and Taiwan. So that's another part of the world that I think people will be paying attention to, and all along those lines. And the lighthearted story, just to end on a lighthearted note that I'm going to get to and everything, and you'll enjoy this, Jatovia, as I was looking at news and everything and finding some unique news and all along those lines. And there's a woman, I forget where she's at, that is literally claiming maybe she spent too much time, and you know, because I've said it on the show before that I've had cats before, and I do like cats and dogs. I'm one of those rare individuals that likes both of them. But she's claiming that she's actually a cat. So I'm going like, how do you claim that you are a cat and everything? Because she's literally saying that she is, as far as she's concerned, she is really a cat and not a human woman and everything. So I'm going like, so I don't get it. How you going to claim to be a cat when you got 2 legs? And last time I checked, cats have 4.
Well, we'll tune into Modern Investing with Sasha Starr because we'll talk more about Taiwan and China.
Yes,
Well,
I
please.
guess after the New York ruling, and he will lose all his real estate business in New York,
Yeah.
he will need a lot of money. And you know what's going to happen? He will accept from China, say, $1 billion, and from Russia, $500 million, and he will attack Taiwan together with China.
Yeah,
And-
yeah. That's not that far fetched.
That was
So on Modern Investment, I hope you guys talk about how Elon Musk is holding Tesla hostage right now, because he sold a bunch of his shares to buy Twitter, which is failing. And now he's holding Tesla hostage because he wants more stock in Tesla, because all of his money was built off of Tesla stock.
That's one of the reasons why Tesla stock is doing so poorly. It's not just the specific car industry issues or electric cars issues. It's also his personal issues just as well.
Yep.
Not a fan. Not a
Reckless.
fan at all.
A lot
No.
of people are not a fan of his at all, but definitely get on out of here. And at 1 o'clock, we'll have
Thank you, Mark.
Modern Investment, and we've got some other shows coming up as well. But this was a robust
Yeah.
conversation, and I enjoyed it. And we'll have another one on tomorrow.
Okay. Bye-bye, guys.
You can see it.
Bye-bye.